Welcome. What's up, folks? We took a little time away. We haven't been quite as consistent, not that we have a real cadence put together yet, but many of you have been giving us great feedback, and some of that feedback has been around the audio quality not being quite hot enough for the folks that are listening on maybe headphones or in their cars. So our lovely and talented alpha audio engineer, Jason Glasgow, went back to the drawing board, designed some new stuff, and you're hearing us today on the new gear. Sadly, we do not have Sarah. She is off viewing colleges with our daughter, so she is not able to be here, and she's super bummed based on the not just the audience, but our guests today, the content that we'll be discussing. And I kind of wanted to start out with a thought there for you. I've had a lot of life experiences that were less than ideal, and I carried a lot of baggage for a long time. And I'm not saying that I've got it all figured out or that it's perfect, but I keep running across this saying that sticks in my mind. Anything that you are not changing, you are choosing. And I know at certain times in my life, someone saying that to me would be tantamount to a slap in the mouth. It would have been a very hard message to receive. And I say it with the utmost love. And the whole goal of what we're doing here is trying to help enlighten people and help people to really find the superhero version of themselves. With that, a long-term friend is here with me today, a man that I met in my men's group work. His name is Ben. Ben also was in tech for a long period of time. And in our conversations in the men's work, it became clear that he wasn't really excited about what he was doing, and that maybe he had a higher calling, something that was more in alignment with his mission. And that comes down to the subject of psychedelics. Ben, welcome, good sir.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I know it's a touchy subject for some folks, but we've been doing some exploration ourselves, Sarah and I, over the years, and we've been chatting with you as well about continuing that exploration. So I wanted to start out kind of talking a little bit about the genesis from tech into, if you will, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but psychedelics in the context of psychotherapy. Does that fit? Does it feel right for you? Like, what exactly would you say you're doing these days?
That's a funny question. If I'm getting you right, what you're asking is kind of like, what's the role of psychedelics in personal development?
Yeah.
And, people contextualize personal development in different ways. There's professional development, there's psychology, psychotherapy, there's spirituality. For me, there's not a big gap between spirituality and psychology. I say that having been raised atheist, having been an atheist for the first 30 some odd years of my life, and really awakening to my spirituality later in life. But having had that awakening and recognizing the power of my heart in the context of my consciousness, and for me, what spirituality boils down to is just knowing yourself, loving yourself, and whatever cultural context or semantics or metaphors you can use to help you do that. That's what spirituality is. Yep. And psychology is pretty much the same thing. Generally speaking, psychology, we tend to approach loving yourself more and knowing yourself more through the lens of like healing trauma and kind of working with the events of your life and how they've impacted you and kind of how you can unwind all that. And in the kind of spirituality that I practice, we do the same thing. And we just use different terminology and different exercises and different substances and whatever tools we have available. Yeah. And so for me, there's not really any difference when I do sessions with people, especially when I'm doing intensives like one-on-one sessions or small group sessions. The spirituality and the psychology just flow together really naturally, and there's not really any need to talk about them separately or even define them particularly. It's just really about what's present in the room that wants to be healed, and how can we do that?
Yeah, and that's I've explored all kinds of. I'm a self-proclaimed biohacker, if you will. I try all kinds of crazy stuff, and just starting to dip my toe into psychedelics. In all honesty, they can be fucking terrifying. I watch a lot of people, I don't want to say abusing them, but, using them in more of a party environment. MDMA is a big one. Let's go to the club and get crazy. And I could certainly see how that would be fun. But when you really frame it contextually about having hard conversations, PTSD, rape, abuse, whatever horrible things that you have to address, the baggage in your life, these are eye openers, and sometimes they tear the covers off in a very aggressive manner, and it can be a lot. So I know that you and I spoke recently about me potentially joining a session or a program with you and doing a number of different plant medicines and exploring those. And specifically, one of them was magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and I have a little bit of experience around it. And honestly, I've not had great experiences with it. I've dipped my toe in, and I remember talking to you, and I was like, well, what kind of dose are we talking about, Ben? And you're like, well, a heroic dose, 5 grams. I thought I was going to choke on my spit sitting there talking to you. I was just like, oh my God, I've taken, 2.5 grams, and it's overwhelming. And I realized that I was probably just on the precipice of something real, and I was just fighting it because there wasn't enough to kick my ass, and force me in. So let's talk a little bit about initially, how did you get into this? Was it, you were doing the tech stuff? Did you just you had some buddies like, hey, we're going to take mushrooms one day. And you're like, well, wow, there's some, how did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I was in the software industry as a developer for a little over 22 years. About 10 years into that career, strongly atheist, very judgmental, very attached to that identity. I had a business with a couple of partners, and one of my partners called me up and said, hey, I heard about this thing, and I'm going to go do it. And he was referring to a particular church that uses ayahuasca that comes from Brazil. In that church, we call that medicine Santo Daime instead of ayahuasca, but it's a
basically
pretty equivalent
stuff,
chemically speaking. and 95% of my brain was pretty much dismissive of the idea. Sort of was like, why would you do that? That sounds like a crazy thing to do. I don't really understand why you would even think about doing that.
It's like your friend being like, hey, let's shoot up heroin this weekend. Like,
yeah,
no,
right. Like,
no.
Okay, I mean, if you want to, I'm not going to. But 5% of my brain in the back said, hey, by the way, you're going. And, it's probably some of the strongest guidance I've ever gotten in my life, which...
first experience?
Yeah, well, when I talk about guidance, I talk about it a lot. For me, it helps me to think about, my heart as being sort of connected to the divine source. Sometimes we call it God. There's all kinds of names, all kinds of metaphors. But my intuition, speaks to me through those channels. And so I call it guidance because I consider that I'm being guided.
Yeah.
And for the first many years of my life, I didn't really pay much attention to anything around that. But that was my first real experience. Excuse me. That was my first real experience with like a strong intuitive hit that I couldn't refuse. And so I tried. Yep. I said, hey, let me know how it goes. And he went and he did it and he told me how it went. It was amazing for him. And again, that part of me just piped up in the back and said, hey, you're going.
It's time.
So what are you waiting for? I was miserable at the time in my life. I had a little baby who had colic and just didn't sleep. I hadn't slept for like 9 months, pretty much ever. I was in bankruptcy. My business, this guy was my partner, and our business was falling apart. through no fault of our own, but it just was a bad time financially. It was 2008, 2009 era. So like we were heavily invested in real estate and lost a tremendous amount of money through real estate, over leveraged, and didn't really know what we were doing in the first place. So gotten some very deep water. My marriage was kind of in the initial phases of failing, and
so nothing big going on in your life.
yeah, it was like, you look at like the major stressors that people list as reasons for people to like have a breakdown. It's like, yeah, I had a lot of them. And so, he told me about it. I decided to go. My wife was willing to let me go. I had to go down to Portland, Oregon for it.
Yeah.
Which meant basically like most of a weekend by the time we got down there and did the thing, and then it was like crash for the night and then come back up. And so that was the first time I did. It was 2009 in November, around Thanksgiving time, and that was the beginning of my journey into the world of what I call entheogens. A lot of people call psychedelics.
Entheogens? I've never even heard the term.
Yeah, entheogen is a term for plant medicines.
Okay.
And I do also work with MDMA, which is not an entheogen because it's a synthetic.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I kind of like to refer to them as entheogens just because psychedelic has such a history in our country.
It's unfortunate. That's the interesting thing to me. I know that some of the people listening, I myself came from a police household, a law enforcement household. Drugs were bad, and I bought into all that Reagan and pre-propaganda bullshit. And it was when I discovered marijuana when I was 24 years old that I was like, oh, I've been lied to.
Yeah, there's another side of this story.
There's more to this, and that is over time emboldened me, and it really infused me with curiosity to start to explore these things. And then I met you, and you started talking about it. So you take that first jump. You try the ayahuasca. Now, I've heard a lot of folks with lots of substances, ayahuasca included, depending on the dose or just your biology or the reaction, lots of people will have experiences where they don't necessarily, it doesn't hit them the first time.
That's not just ayahuasca. There's a lot of factors. Timothy Leary back in the 60s, right, talked about set and setting.
Yes.
And so that was both kind of the nature of the container that you were in, literally the physical environment and the ceremony and ritual that you were participating in, and then the people that you were with.
Yep.
And your own set of your intention and kind of like how you were coming into it and what your goals were. And those things hold just as true today. That's like probably the biggest factor for how your experience is going to be in terms of feeling safe, in terms of bad trip versus challenging trip that teaches you good lessons,
Yeah.
It's very, very important. So I'm very careful about who I take things with, what the container is going to look like, and I don't really consider that I've had since 2009. I've done hundreds of works, which is what we call our ceremonies with medicine from Brazil. I've worked with mushrooms. I've worked with lots of things, and I don't really consider that I've had a bad trip in all that time.
Wow.
I've had very challenging trips. I've had journeys that left me questioning whether I was ever going to do that again, for sure. But they were all for my healing. And when you have the faith and the trust in the medicine and in your guides, whatever that means to you, and you're with good people and you're doing it in an intentional way, it's very unlikely that you're going to experience it as some sort of like victimizing experience. You recognize your own responsibility in who you are and how your system is operating, and the choices you've made and the experiences you've had and what your goals are all factor in.
So it's funny, I'm trying to work the timeline in my head. As I had mentioned, we had done some men's work, and you and I have talked about this, and for some reason I feel that it's germane to the conversation. In our work, you were probably the only person who ever directly challenged me. And the funny thing about it wasn't the challenge so much as I had spent the 20 years leading up to that doing psychotherapy, group therapy, meditation, doctor prescribed, big pharma type drugs, all this stuff. And same experience you were describing, just I wasn't happy. Things were failing. Just, I had everything on paper that, makes you awesome and great at life. And it just was hollow and it sucked. And we were sitting there in a meeting one day, and I was talking about a longstanding problem of mine around personal accountability and integrity, fidelity. And you looked at me across the room and just said, I'm not saying you have to do anything, but until you own this and clean it up, you're going to be stuck here. Just, it so instantaneously resonated at my core of just like, one, fuck you, I'm mad at you. And two, you were right. And seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And that led into the next probably 5 years of work that I did and included my wife in, and it was fucking horrible. But boy, I look back now and I'm like, the sky's the limit, man. If you can, whether it's, however you get there, getting to that aha moment in your life where you can put the baggage down and the bullshit and step forward. And I just wanted to thank you for...
Yeah, you're welcome.
For highlighting what I needed to do.
Yeah.
But, track of mind, wandering around. So let's dig a little bit. So you do this first ayahuasca ceremony. Did you kind of immediately feel the calling of like, oh, I'm gonna move into, be at a wellness center or therapy or whatever? Like, did you immediately think that you were going to begin assisting others in this, or was it just for you at that time?
Oh, I mean, it was 100% selfish, and I was full of doubt. I wasn't really. I had this sort of dual nature to my approach to it, where part of me, that intuitive part, knew that I really needed some big changes in my life, and whatever I was doing wasn't working, and I didn't know what else to do, and so I needed a fresh influx of information. And then the other part of me was like, hey, these people are Christians. They're using psychedelics. I've never even smoked pot before.
I'm kind of shocked. These were Christian folks.
This is a church, like I said. So when I say it's a church, I mean it. It's a church.
Wow. I'm going to be super honest and transparent. I thought that was just like a nice loophole to kind of work around the system with some of the potential legality questions. Like, this is a legitimate church that does. Okay. Wow.
When we do our works, there's a cross on the table, and we say prayers at the beginning and the end that are Catholic prayers, like Our Fathers and Hail Marys. And
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you, I also, I was raised with a less than flattering view of Christianity, and I'm trying to be more open-minded to it. And interestingly enough, the intersection, like you said, of spirituality and religion, I'm starting to realize maybe I just don't like the idea of a supreme being. It's more of just like, we're all interconnected. We're all part of this system. But it's like, yeah, tomato, like however you want to say it.
It doesn't really matter. Like, you can call it whatever you want, and you can hold it in your mind however you want. Our minds aren't really competent to handle this level of connection, and they're not really the tool that we have to operate on that level. They're the wrong tool for the job. And so when we try to use our minds to understand it, and we try to use our minds to define things and judge things and create definition, you completely lose the point. You've lost any shred of connection to the
trying
actual
to do the
truth that you're trying to connect.
Analyze it and
and so then that's when I came into the Daime. I came in. I think I would venture to say that nearly every U.S. born person or American, whatever, probably nearly everyone in the world at this point has religious trauma. Of one kind or another, whether you grew up in the church and it was hard on you, whether you grew up against the church, your family was against the church, whether you watch the news and see, or you read your history books and you see the things that are done in the name of the church, one way or another, we encounter a lot of negative impact, that's enacted in the name of the church in one way or another. So, the nice thing about the Santo Daime as a religion is that it's a very Gnostic, mystic spirituality. So we hold that the daime itself, the medicine, like, you know, what you might call ayahuasca, is literally like a manifestation of the Christic consciousness.
Wow.
Right. So when you drink it and you take communion with the Christ consciousness, you're in direct communion with the divine. However each individual holds that, we don't ask anybody to believe that. I never say to someone, hey, you can't come unless you believe that. Everyone's welcome to come to our works, whatever you believe. I have no interest in telling anyone what to believe. And I don't even know what I believe myself, and I don't have to because I just go into communion with this being, with this energy, and I learn what I learn. And no human is going to tell me any truth that is even relevant to my existence in the same way that that medicine is. So we don't have sermons. We don't have the Bible even. We have songs that we sing. It's a musical doctrine, so pretty much we open the work, we say some prayers, and we start singing, and we sing for about 8 hours, and then we say some more prayers and close the work.
You sing for 8 hours.
Yeah. And, you know, with little breaks to drink more medicine. And every once in a while.
So it's a workout too.
Yeah. But the medicine gives you the strength, and it gives you the fortitude to just keep doing that. And most of the songs are in Portuguese because the doctrine comes from Brazil. So we sing in Portuguese for 6 to 8 hours. It's beautiful. And so most of us up here in the States, we don't know Portuguese. In my 13 years now, I've learned enough to know what I'm singing most of the time. But most of the people in the room don't even know what the words are really.
Just making mouth noises.
Yeah, it's just a vibration, right? Yeah. And so the nice thing about it is, like, you don't have to know what they mean. You're in the force of the medicine, and this beautiful music is coming directly into your being, you know, through the channels. And it's healing, and it supports the process of connection and healing and transformation. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's just like magic.
So how long you've been now? I've heard a little bit. The Church of the Daime, they started in Southern America,
in Brazil,
and then have kind of moved. There's
worldwide
sects, if is the right word, but
churches.
Yeah, churches all over. So did you actually open one? Was there already one here
Yeah, we started a little church up here.
Wow.
When I first started, there was a small church up here. It shut down after a few years. Ended up there were other churches in the area, Portland, like I said, Portland, Oregon, Bremerton, Washington for a while, now Olympia, Washington. I'm up in the Seattle area.
Yep.
And eventually kind of got the calling that, like, it was time for me to open my own little church, and my wife was on board and is very amazing and generous and loving and highly skilled healer. And so, the two of us did it. We didn't do it alone. There were already other people up in this area who had experience in the daime, and so we had some support. And it's small, you know. We do our works in our living room right now.
Yep.
But yeah, it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Wow. So, you know, we've got the Daime Church, and then, if I understand correctly, your wife is a psychotherapist, or? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so I assume she does some of this kind of stuff as well. I mean, do you guys ever work together with couples, or?
You know, it's interesting, right? So she's a licensed therapist, mm-hmm. and licensure is not something to take for granted. You have to protect it, and you have to take care of it. And so she has to be really careful about what she does in the role as a therapist versus outside of that. And so the Daime Church is legal. Yep. Our church is legal. The medicine that we get comes from Brazil. It's inspected by customs on the way into the country. It's tracked by the DEA, so we report how much we use, and it's all above board, and it's
nice,
which is very nice. That said, it's it's still like a very new and very touchy legal area, so it's not something to take for granted and like lean into and push the envelope on. We're like following the rules very closely, and we're just taking it slow.
Kind of like a pot shop. You just cross every T, dot every I.
Exactly. Like, you just want to don't rock the boat.
Yep.
So, my wife co-leads that church with me, not as a therapist, but as a citizen.
Yep.
she doesn't do any other medicine work with clients or anything along those lines.
Yeah.
Because it's just too close to what she does professionally and would just really open her up.
Jeopardize her career potentially
Yeah,
and put her in
Yep.
the legal crosshairs.
Yep. So we got to be really careful about that.
Yeah. So then, I'm not super educated specifically around a lot of these substances. A lot of people's fear, I think, with these, like I said, historical propaganda of people going crazy and all this kind of stuff. I assume you're familiar with the LD50 measurements, lethal dose 50. They basically judge all substances, like even like aspirin, like how much aspirin does the average human being have to take before it's lethal? And most drugs are graded as such. And as I understand, like marijuana, it's like the only way you're dying from marijuana is if a brick of it falls out of an airplane in the sky and crushes you. Like that's how you die from marijuana.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of these other substances, though, I don't know. Is there a level like ayahuasca, for instance? Is there a toxicity concern?
No. I've drank tremendous amount myself, and I know people who have drank even more than me. So, no, as far as I know, there's no lethal dose of ayahuasca. It does impact your serotonin system, and so I suppose it's possible if you took enough over a prolonged period of time that your neurotransmitters would get enough out of whack that you'd have some health impact.
Yeah.
More than likely, that would manifest most as depression.
Yeah.
As your serotonin was just like too expressed, and just hadn't had enough time to be uptaken, and so you just weren't able to offset. You wouldn't be able to return to the natural rhythm of serotonin in your body, and so at that point you might get really depressed. And when people get really depressed, sometimes they hurt themselves or kill themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's, a concern, I suppose. But I've never, with ayahuasca, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Anybody take enough for that to really be a thing. MDMA is a little bit more prone to that, just because of the way our bodies metabolize. It's much more slow. And so it's disrupting our serotonin levels more than ayahuasca does.
Well, let's change step then. Let's talk about MDMA a little bit.
Sure.
As I understand it, 80s I think is kind of when it came around. Maybe a little bit earlier.
No, it's been around much longer than that.
Oh, has it?
I think maybe the 30s, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I know, it was legal for a period of time, and then it got scheduled. Is it class 1 or whatever? Like saying there's no medical benefit, which is complete and utter nonsense. But we can come back to that later. What do your protocols around that look like when you work with folks? Because like I said, I've tried it a handful of times, and I am like running down the streets telling all my friends, like, take MDMA, do it in the right environment, be safe. But holy shit, the conversations my wife and I have had.
Yeah, MDMA is a really powerful healing medicine. And when you say protocols, that can mean a lot of different things. Sort of from a dosage protocol, I wouldn't take it more than once a month.
Yep.
I typically, when I'm working with someone doing what I call an intensive, we're going to do a deep dive, and I don't take it myself.
Yep.
Only my client, for lack of a better term. I don't love that word because I'm not licensed to anything. But the person I'm working with, I'll give them 200 milligrams, which is, again, what they call a full ride. I prefer, I don't know. I don't love any of the terminology. Like a lot of terminology comes into this world that comes through sort of the underground party, whatever scene. And I don't really have a lot of judgments about that. Like people want to party and they want to take MDMA and feel good. Like, who am I to say that that's a bad thing? But things like full ride and heroic dose, some of those were kind of coined in a sort of sensational way. But they do refer to a dose that is kind of like the maximum, right? Yeah. Where if you took any more, it would kind of almost just like be a waste. because your body doesn't have enough receptor sites to like handle it. So it would just be like
deleterious
go
effects,
into your
just
liver and, you know, you pee it out basically. So 200 milligrams is about the max dose that anybody really needs with MDMA. And so I pretty much give that to people unless they're like highly sensitive and they want to take a little bit less, I will moderate it. You know, obviously the person, the client's the boss. If they want to take less, I'm not going to make, I'm not going to push
No, you're doing more.
Yeah, right. So when you take 200 milligrams, you know, it comes on in about 20 minutes or so. And the whole thing takes about 4 hours, maybe 5 hours before you're kind of coming back to earth in a pretty good way.
And I'm curious, so the experiences I've had with it, I've been in the 100 to 125 milligram department, or sorry, yes, that's right, milligram. And those are very, just like the best mood I've ever been in, gooey, lovey. There is zero judgment. There is zero angst or anger. Like somebody could be like, hey, you know, like I killed your parents. Like, man, well, that's a real bummer. You know, in that moment, your defenses are just down and you're just like, you feel connected to people.
Yep. Yeah. So to get back to an earlier question that you asked, which I sort of only got halfway through, is, you know, what are people's experiences like when they come into the medicine for the first time?
Yep.
Right. Including my own. So when I came into the DIME for the first time, which was my first work with any entheogens or psychedelics, whatever you want to call them, I hadn't even ever smoked marijuana before that. I took it for the first time and I sat there for 8 hours, bored out of my mind and feeling extremely disappointed and depressed that I wasn't getting anything out of this whole experience. And I looked around the room, everybody else is in rhapsody and they're, you know, some of them are struggling, they're having challenges, but like they're obviously going through something. And I wasn't going through anything. I was just sitting there. And the music is nice, but you know, 8 hours of people singing in Portuguese gets kind of boring after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went home and I said, you know, I'm never doing that again. That was just really disappointing. And I assumed it was because I was an atheist and I didn't really believe. So maybe that just kind of blocked it. I don't know. I didn't know. But I put it out of my mind really quickly. Like, you know, just said, hey, I'm not doing that again. And 3 days after that, I was driving down the road up here and I just realized all of a sudden that I had to pull over. And it was another intuitive hit, you know, it was immediate. And so I pulled over to the side of the road. I didn't even get a chance to put the car in park. I was like sitting there with my foot on the brake and started to get this download that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced in my life. Really what I describe sometimes as like tectonic shifts in my consciousness, where just like the continents of my thoughts and my attachments and my ideas about how the world and the universe works were just breaking apart. And they were doing that because they don't work. You know, they didn't work. I was miserable.
Broken models.
Yeah. And it wasn't all good. It was like they were breaking apart. They weren't being replaced by anything. I was just kind of falling apart a little bit. But it felt really good because it felt like a release from this prison in my own mind. And so I don't know how long it took. It could have been 10 seconds. It could have been 5 minutes. I don't really know. It wasn't super long, but I was sitting in my car, you know, with my foot on the brake, like crying and laughing and kind of like totally out of it. I'm really fortunate that a cop didn't drive by right then because who knows what they would have thought. But
Have you taken anything today?
Yeah,
no,
right.
No, I have not.
I had not. But I drove home that night. You know, I went back home and I connected with my wife at the time. And she said, well, you did do that thing 3 days ago. And I had so thoroughly put it out of my mind that I hadn't even connected the two.
It.
Yeah. And so it was like, holy crap, you're right. And so nobody's peeing.
Nobody's peeing. Sound is good.
So yeah, then I realized I needed to go back. And so I went back the next month and did it again. And the exact same thing happened. The only difference was I wasn't sitting there sort of feeling depressed. I was like, hey, as long as I get my download in 3 days, I'm good to go.
Yeah, all's well.
I'll just listen to the music. And sure enough, came back to Seattle. 3 days later, it was December. I was walking down the street on Westlake Avenue, and the sun was shining. It was a brilliant winter day. And I just looked up at the sun, and all of a sudden, like, you know, the world started to cave in again, and tears were streaming down my face. I'm sure I looked like some crazy person,
yeah,
you know, just
what's
like
up with this homeless guy?
Yeah, I just stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, just staring up at the sky, crying and like laughing. and I called up the guy who kind of had helped me into the church and like, kind of guided me in. And I said, geez, I think I might actually be able to be happy in my life. And he was like, yeah, that's right. And,
how was that? Like having that.
It was sunshine on my heart, no doubt. It was the first real hope that I'd had in my entire life of being happy.
I just can't even imagine like how like almost brings me to tears thinking of like spending your entire life just like, well, I guess this is what I got. These are my cards.
Yeah,
and
right.
like, oh nope, there's another level.
There's more out there. And so, it took me probably half a dozen works before I started to really feel the medicine in the work. And I still to this day don't experience it the same way that a lot of people do. I don't have a lot of visions. For me, it's much more of a felt experience. It's just like I'm feeling my heart open. I'm feeling my whole body just kind of more unified with my consciousness. And then I can examine my life, while I'm singing, while I'm at this point leading the works. I'm also examining my life, examining my relationships, my reactions to situations, and saying, hey, like, is there room for more compassion here? And of course there is. There always is. And when I tap into it, I feel better. And so that's just it's as simple as that.
That in itself is like, yep, I'm in.
That's what it's all about. Like that's what Jesus Christ was saying the whole time. Was like, what do you think this is all about? It's like, do you love yourself or not? And if you don't love yourself, how could you love anyone else?
Yeah.
And once you do love yourself, then it's easy
really
to love
everybody else.
It's sort of binary almost.
Yeah.
But we're also like always on the spectrum. You're never like one or the other.
Yeah.
But there is this like kind of polarity to it. And so, all the whole Bible, every single word in the Bible is geared towards just getting you to that place, and every metaphor for God from every culture in the whole world, and the Christ and Virgin Mary and all the archangels and, you name it, and the Hindu gods, all of that, everything is all getting you to the same place. And even Buddhism, which doesn't have deities, right, per se, although Tibetan Buddhism certainly has bodhisattvas and other beings that are helping along the way. It's all just metaphor for getting us to that place of a feeling that really our mind can't even encompass.
Grasp.
Yeah. And so it's a beautiful process to watch people come into the Daime however they are in their life, whatever their level of connection on different planes of existence or whatever it is. And then they come and they take the Daime and they have their experience. And for some people, they don't come back, and that's blessings to them.
Yeah.
Like that's not their path. And for other people, it's like this awakening. And for other people, it just feels really natural. And it's like just an extension of what they were already working on. And it's just all good. Like for me, I'm just like, hey, whoever wants to come, like, let's just be together and work, let's get some work done. And so with the MDMA, it's really kind of the same thing. It's just a totally different context. I don't do MDMA sessions in the context of a Christian Santo Daime work.
Yep.
I do them in a more kind of open to what where the client is, kind of a way.
What do you want to work on?
Yeah, what do you want to work on, and what are your supports in your consciousness? For some people it's Christianity, for some people it's whatever it is. In this part of the world, there's a lot of atheists. The Seattle area is like one of the most atheist places on the planet, and so a lot of people don't come in with like a strong connection to spirituality, and it's like, well, great, we'll just work on a different level, and that's fine. Yeah. All
right. So we've talked a little bit. I haven't really delved too much. Maybe we'll come back to mushrooms. We've talked about mushrooms a little bit. We've talked about MDMA. We've talked about ayahuasca, Daime. Kambo, I believe, is another one that you've spoken about. Tell me a little bit more about Kambo.
Yeah, it's kind of a very different level of medicine than all these other things we've been talking about, which are very consciousness oriented. They have physical components to the experience. Certainly they offer healing that directly impacts your physical body in certain ways. But Kambo is a frog poison that comes also from the Amazon rainforest. It's like a friend medicine to ayahuasca. Can I talk for a little bit about the sort of the Amazonian conceptualization of 100%. Medicine?
Yeah.
So similar to like the Chinese medicine, which deals with the meridians, right, and the flow of energy through the body, or the chakra system that comes from India, which also, the Kundalini and is the energy flow in the body in different centers, having to do with different aspects of consciousness, and also of physical health. In the Amazon region, there's, a lot of different people. It's a big area, right? It's an area that's like almost as big as the US. It's huge. Even though it's shrinking fast, it's still pretty huge. So it's really hard to generalize and say, oh, the people down there believe this or that, because there's like thousands of miles and most of them have never encountered each other's cultures. But there is a sharing of information and there's a network of connection, and there's a general conception of medicine or of health as being energetic in its foundation, and that disruptions in the natural flow of energy are what cause unhealth. And that can manifest in bad luck. It can manifest in trouble in your relationships. It can manifest in physical health issues. Basically, any malady that you can name fits into a conceptualization of an energetic blockage, stagnation, dissonance, right, disconnection. And so, and that energy flows between people. It flows into the forest. There's so much life down there, and there's so much energy in the system, right? That like when you're there, you just basically are plugged in. And it's just, if your plug's a little off, you're going to get sick, or you're going to have bad luck, or something bad's going to happen. And so how do we fix that? Well, it depends on what the manifestation is. We're going to use a different medicine to address it.
Oh, right? So you actually use different things for different purposes.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And so, if I was a shaman in the Brazilian rainforest or Peru or Colombia or whatever, and somebody comes and says, hey, like, this is what's going on with me, I need help with it, then the shaman's going to tune in. Often the shaman will drink the ayahuasca. It's not so much about the person who's sick drinking ayahuasca. The shaman drinks ayahuasca so that they can connect and get information about what the proper remedy is. And that remedy could be for them to drink ayahuasca. It could be for them to take this frog poison. It could be for them to, drink their own urine. Like, there's like a million different remedies that are used in that system. There's so many plants there. There's so many animals there, right? So like all of those are connected. And so those are all medicine in one form or another. That said, some of them are kind of, if you think about like a broad spectrum antibiotic, right? Like some of them can address a lot of different problems, and so you can throw them at a whole set of problems. Kambo is a very strong medicine. It comes from a tree frog that lives in the canopy of the forest. It's a big tree frog. It's like one of the biggest in the world. Like you can't see my hands right now because you're just listening, but it's like probably. It's big.
It's like the size of a loaf of bread.
It's like the size of a loaf of bread.
Wow, that's a big fat frog.
Big fat frog. And so they live up in the canopy, and they're a frog, so they need to retain moisture because they're not really down on the ground where the moisture is. So they secrete this waxy covering that they coat all their whole skin with. And that waxy substance kind of keeps water in their body, and it also is poisonous. So nothing eats them.
Yeah. You want a meal? It's going to cost you.
Go somewhere else. Yep. But it's not poisonous enough to kill anything, because they don't actually want the predators to die. They want them to remember and teach their offspring not to eat those things.
Shooting an animal with a salt pack.
Don't
come back.
Don't do that. So because of that, they are basically untouched by any predator, and they're utterly docile. You can walk right up to them and just pull them off the tree and carry them around and manipulate their bodies, and they just kind of don't really care.
Okay, what's up?
Yeah, cool. This is cool.
Everything's fine.
Everything's fine. And so you can scrape that waxy substance off of them. You can use it right away. I've never had the privilege to do that because I haven't been down there. But you can also just spread it out on a stick and let it dry, and it kind of dries into like a varnish. And then that'll last for years. And then all you have to do is put some water on it, reconstitute it, and then it's as good as new.
Wow.
And so the way that medicine works is it has a very large number of different biopeptides in it. And biopeptides are short chains of amino acids. So it's like a very small protein.
Yep.
And your body uses biopeptides as messenger molecules. So when it's time for you to start salivating because you're eating food, or it's time to increase your heart rate, or it's time for your blood vessels to constrict or dilate, the things that cause those actions to occur are the secretion of biopeptides from glands in your body that land on receptor sites and trigger a cascade of action.
Interesting. So it's just signaling stuff.
It's just signaling, right? And so hormones are fall in the same category. So what's interesting is when you take this medicine and you put it directly into your bloodstream, it triggers a big cascade of effects in your body that are not normally sequenced in the same way that they're sequenced when the medicine hits.
So you're basically hijacking the system and sending signals that your body didn't naturally produce.
Correct. And it basically is the signals of your body saying, hey, I've been poisoned. So when your body's poisoned, it tries to get that stuff out. And in the process of trying to get that stuff out, it gets out any toxins that happen to be present. The purge, right? And so, and the way it does that is basically pull them out of wherever they're living, those toxins. So those could be in your organs, they can be like literally lodged in your cells, and puts them into your bloodstream, gets them to your liver, sends them into your bile, which goes in your gallbladder, and then from there into your intestines, and then you can expel it, right? Your intestines are part of your digestive tract that has openings to the world, right? Yeah. Either your mouth or out the bottom. And so, so when you take Kambo, you drink a whole bunch of water, and then you put this stuff into your bloodstream, and I can talk about how that works.
Yeah, let's come back to that.
We'll get to that, yeah. And then your body kicks into this detox mode, and your digestive system starts to spasm, and all your organs are getting flushed out, and all the toxins that have been living in your cells get flushed out, and they wind up getting shot into your digestive system, which is then in spasm and is purging and getting rid of as much as it can. And the amazing thing about this is, like, there's something about the strength of the reaction and the power of it that can pull things out of you that have been in you for years. So one example is people who got a lot of ear infections when they were kids.
Right here.
Yeah. So you remember that pink stuff that you would drink, the erythromycin,
yep,
right? That
100%.
was like the antibiotic, and that has that flavor, right? That's kind of unforgettable and like it's really unique.
I love it for some reason.
Yeah, a lot of people do, right?
do.
Yeah, it's like comforting in some way, and of course it's like associated with like getting rid of the earache, so that's a good thing too. And if I gave you Kambo right now, if you took enough of that when you were a kid, it's very likely that some of that stuff is still in your body. And that people, I've given Kambo to people who are in middle age, and they can literally, as they're purging, they can taste it. Yeah, that flavor comes back onto their tongue.
That's insane.
Yeah. And so when you think about the body as like an organism that's like holding on to these toxins, that have been in your body potentially for years. And an antibiotic, even though it's helpful to us, is a toxin.
Destructive as hell.
I mean, they kill organisms, right? Yeah. And so they're not the kind of thing you actually want to have in your system your whole life, long term. And when you look at like the modern age and how many people get cancer and why, we got a lot of toxins in our bodies that just hang around forever. And Kambo is a really powerful agent to try to help detox that. In addition to that, it also just kind of returns balance to your whole digestive system, to your circulatory system, all the systems that in our modern life get highly disrupted by stress.
Yeah.
And we go through our lives, most of us at an elevated stress level without really thinking too much about it, without really being able to do too much about it. And then when we try to address it, most of us try to address our stress by calming down, right? We try to like force ourselves to calm down. And that's really hard. Yeah. If you can imagine like walking around all day with your biceps flexed, right? So you walk around for an entire day flexing your biceps as hard as you can, right? And then like you get to the end of the day, you're like, okay, I'm too stressed out. I got to calm down.
Just gonna let him go.
Right? So you're just going to let him go. And your arms are going to be like, I don't know what you mean.
Yeah,
I don't know how to let go.
This is how we are now.
My triceps are atrophied, and my biceps are just frozen, right? And so that's kind of how our whole systems operate in this life that we lead as Americans.
Carry around that stress.
Yeah, we carry around, and it affects our blood vessels and the constriction of our blood vessels. It affects our digestive systems. It's like pervasive. And so the other way to address it, besides saying, "Hey, calm down," is to like, okay, squeeze harder, right? Squeeze as hard as you like, get all the way, like pull like a slingshot, go all the way and then let go. Right. And now instead of just letting go back to where you were before, you can go all the way to relaxed. Right. And so Kambo kind of does that, whether you like it or not. Once you get that medicine, it doesn't give you a choice. It's like, we're going to stress your system up to like the max. And then when you come back down, you're going to land back where you're supposed to be. Right. And so that means that people with digestive disorders that are often exacerbated, if not caused by stress, by constant stress, people with circulatory issues, joint issues like lubrication of the joints, all of these things can really be helped by Kambo because you're basically like taking the body through that whole cycle of stress all the way back to baseline. And then all of a sudden you're how you're supposed to be.
So Kambo then is the intention with it, or hope or goal is really more of a physical realignment, if you will.
It's definitely that I would say that's kind of like the primary effect. And certainly when you first start taking it, that is what you're going to notice the most. Yep. It's uncomfortable. I mean, there's no getting around it. It's like uncomfortable. It takes about 20 minutes or so to go through the whole thing, from when you put the medicine on until you take it off and stop feeling it. And during that 20 minutes, you go through a physical journey that is not comfortable.
You're really selling this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an ordeal. But when you first start, you get really preoccupied by that. And you're just noticing a lot how nauseated you are and how hot you feel and how cold you feel and how faint you feel and how tired you feel and how uncomfortable you feel.
Yeah.
Once you do it enough, you can cultivate your capacity and your skills to navigate that experience without being completely consumed by it. And so then your consciousness can be paying attention to what's happening on more subtle levels. And on more subtle levels, it's my belief that there are beings at work with that medicine that are opening pathways and opening doors inside of you, which are allowing the release, of course, of the purge and everything. But at the same time, we're a unified system. And when you're releasing and purging on a physical level, you have an opportunity to also be working with transformation and healing of trauma, grief, things that we don't always do well on our own. And so it becomes a more multidimensional medicine as you dive into it deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the names of that medicine we say is the Great Revealer, because even when you can, for some people, it's really hard to fully surrender to the purge. It's really hard to surrender to letting go of things that they've been carrying for so long. And they're not even conscious of that. And so if we can at least give the opportunity to say, "Hey, can you let go of that?" And they say no, then okay, but at least now we know you're holding it. Right. Yeah. And so that's new information.
You can fix things that you're aware of.
Ultimately, healing is just new information.
Yeah.
Right. So if we get new information, then the job is done. Whether or not you like accomplished some level of purge or whatever it is, Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about this. So we talked about bloodstream. So how are we administering this?
Yeah, so Kambo is, it comes from the jungle where they don't have hypodermic needles and whatnot. So, and it's this kind of waxy goo, that we're working with. So we burn little holes in the skin with a little ember, and we're just trying to get just like 1 or 2 layers deep. So it's not like a brand. We're not like, you don't hear the sizzle. We just kind of brush it across the skin and get a couple layers deep so that we can get to the lymphatic system. If we can get to the lymphatic system, that then leads to the bloodstream. So we call them gates, and you just burn the gates in the skin. Usually it's a line.
I can see some there.
Yeah, I got some scars on my arm here. And so you make a line of dots and then clean them up, and then you just put the goo right on there.
Yep.
Yeah, and it just goes right in. And,
wow.
It's amazingly fast. Usually after I put the medicine on, within a minute, you're feeling it.
So you mentioned you drink a ton of water, a liter, a gallon. What are we talking about?
Typically, I would ask people to drink 2 liters right before I put the medicine on. So you do a water fast ideally from the night before.
Yep.
And then around 10 in the morning is when I like to give the medicine. So you're pretty dried out.
Yep.
And then I get you to drink 2 liters. That pretty much creates a column of water all the way from your like esophagus down into your intestine, right? And the ileocecal valve, the valve between your stomach and the intestines, opens as wide as it can because your stomach is like, hey, we got to get this
too much.
going, right? It's too much. And then you put the medicine on and the purge starts and everything's just opened up. And so anything that winds up in your intestine from, detox just comes right out.
I think you're really onto something here. Maybe we could, get a new like Men's Health cleanse diet. None of these veggie smoothies for a week. We're just gonna find a nice fat frog in the Amazon and burn you, and
it works for me.
We're gonna clean you out.
Yep, it works for me.
Well, this is amazing. Are there other substances, medicines that you work in?
Sure. I mean, another one is called Sananga. It's an eye drop. Often I administer that with Kambo, like either before or after, usually before. It just helps move energy. It's an eye drop, so it drops in your eyes. It's kind of painful. It's kind of like getting lemon juice in your eye. Most of the medicines aren't fun.
Yeah.
And for me, that's sort of like, a lot of people think of these things as drugs, especially the ones that affect your consciousness, and they'll call them a drug, and they'll say, oh yeah, I went on I got high or whatever. And it's like, for me, if it feels good while you're doing it and you feel like crap afterwards, that's a drug. If it feels like crap when you do it and you feel better afterwards, that's medicine.
I like that.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way. It's kind of brilliant.
Yeah. There's a little bit of an exception with MDMA because there's not really any crappy part of MDMA, but for some people, they do have a little bit of a dip afterwards.
Yeah. Some of that slow, stupid, depressive.
Yeah, again, it's the serotonin and dopamine being disrupted, and it just kind of leaves you feeling a little flat. But for me, that's an opportunity to introspect and take some time with what you learned while you were in the force of the medicine. And it can be hard if you're like trying to go back to work and trying to function, like a normal person, and you're at the same time trying to process all this new information, and you're in this state. But it is what it is.
That statement, wow. Say that again. The way you were talking about a drug versus medicine.
Yeah. Like I said, if it feels good while you're doing it and it feels bad afterwards, then that to me is a drug. And if it feels bad while you're doing it, or it's challenging or difficult in any way, and you have to invest in it, and then you feel great afterwards and you feel like you've healed something, that's medicine.
I feel like the Pfizer police are going to show up at our house. Big Pharma is going to be mad at you for that statement.
Well, there's a reason these things have been so suppressed. They're very hard to recreate in a lab, and they're very cheap, generally speaking. And
you don't have to be on it.
They're available in nature, and they affect lasting change. You don't have to be on it for life. They're non-addictive. It's not a capitalist system. It doesn't fit into the capitalist system. So, yeah. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories and yada yada, and I don't really spend a whole lot of time thinking or talking about that stuff. But it is true that the forces that have tried to suppress this stuff are the same forces that are supporting capitalism and big pharma.
Well, there's no money in getting you fixed.
Yeah, that's right.
So back to this eye drop. What was it called again?
Sananga.
And what is that based on? Like, is it an animal byproduct? Is it a?
It's the root of a shrub. I can't remember the name, Tabernathus something or other, but it's actually a shrub that's in the same family as the shrub from which they make iboga. If you ever heard of iboga, so it doesn't have iboga in it. People like to talk about it as if it did, but it doesn't. But it is in that same family. So you take the roots, you macerate them, which basically just means grind them up, put them in some water, buried in the ground for a few days, and you got Sananga. As simple as that.
And then the eye drop, and what is kind of the effect and experience of this?
On a physical level, it kind of can clear up any protein deposits that have formed on your eye, so you actually can clarify your vision.
Whoa!
Which is pretty awesome. Every time I take it, all the colors seem really like kind of more saturated, and everything is just a little like brighter and fuller. And the idea with that medicine is that it helps with discernment. So, if you're making bad choices in your life, or if you're having trouble seeing the good choice, which most of us do, in one way or another, it can just help you see more clearly, in all the different ways that we talk about seeing.
Very cool.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful medicine, really easy, short. It's not terribly uncomfortable, and it's over quickly. And I love that medicine. It's great. I work a little bit with hape, which is really gaining in popularity right now. I don't really use it myself very often. It's one that can be very addictive, and I see a lot of addiction with hape, and so I'm very wary of offering it to anybody else, and I'm wary of using it myself because I don't really need any more addiction in my life than I already have. But hape is a snuff. So that's something that you would kind of blow up into your sinuses and your mucous membranes, and it kind of absorbs. And it's really strong. It's very powerful. It has nicotine in it. That's the addictive component.
And what is the effect or desired outcome of the use of that?
It's like you blow it, right? And you blow it sort of up, the trajectory of it is up into your head, right? And a lot of people talk about feeling like, wow, it feels like I just got my head blown off with a shotgun or something, right? It just kind of opens the channel upward. And so it can be very clarifying. It can be grounding in the sense of just bringing you right into the moment.
Yep. Presence amplifier.
Yeah. And at the same time, it can make you feel kind of more connected through the crown, right? Which is like how we connect upwards to source, and kind of opening the channels to light, And it also, because it has nicotine, for people who are not used to nicotine, it can be a purgative as well.
Oh, and dude,
right?
Nicotine is, especially when it's more pure, not the chemicalized crap you buy at the gas station.
Yeah. So sometimes if I've given someone Kambo and they're having trouble initiating the purge, we can give hape to help just kind of like open the gates, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, very cool. I mean, are there other substances that you work with, or?
The main one I work with, really, honestly, when you say work with, like me personally versus what I offer for other people, I don't offer people things that I don't work with myself, I guess.
Yeah.
Those are the main ones. I've worked with Iboga before. It's not the kind of thing you do regularly. It's extremely strong. It's extremely powerful medicine. My heart really is in the daime. That's kind of my home base.
Yeah.
I take that at least once a month, and twice if I can.
So, Church of the Daime, is that for people that are interested in this, is this something that you can just go out and Google search and people could hey, I want to try this, I want to explore it? Is this something that is fairly accessible?
It's a little harder to find than that.
Yeah.
One of the core tenets of our doctrine is not to proselytize.
Yeah.
One of our mottos or slogans or whatever is everyone's welcome, no one's invited. Right. So
you found your way here.
Yeah. Knock on the door and we'll answer. And there's problems with that approach, especially here in the U.S. It's a privileged thing to know about the daime, and who are most of the people that know about the daime is like white people, rich people.
Yeah.
And so, how do we get more people of color have access to this? How do we get people who are like economically in a different class? How do we get them access to this without promoting it? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's a very clear mandate in the doctrine that you don't promote it.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there's legality issues. So we don't want, I can't, we're not going to hang out a shingle and have a website and say, hey, come on down.
Daime.com.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, so people usually hear about a friend of a friend kind of a thing. And
don't reach out to me. I'm not giving you Ben's contact information.
You can reach out to Chris, and he'll be my filter. And then
if you pass the Chris test.
Yeah, yeah. And the truth is, everyone is welcome. I'm always pleased when I hear from someone that I don't know who's saying, hey, I found out about you one way or another, and I'd like to have more information. I'm always happy to talk to people about it and welcome people to come to Works. We are a small church, and so, excuse me, for us to have new people, we have to have a certain level we have to have a certain amount of people there that are experienced and can hold the space, because it's intense, and new people can have challenges, meeting this medicine, just getting to know it and getting to know the manner in which it works with you. It can open up places in you that you've been keeping closed off, because they're too painful, or you just weren't willing.
Yeah.
And the medicine might say, hey, for me, it's like I said before, it's a manifestation of the Christic consciousness. And so, Christ knows better than you what you're ready for. That's, for me, an article of faith that is basically an omnipotent energy being. And so when I take communion with it, I have total trust and faith that it's going to give me what I need. That might be more or less than what I thought I needed or wanted.
You might not know what you need.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes I'll go into work and say, hey, I'm pretty strung out. Like, I just need a work that kind of supports me and kind of helps me just keep it together and returns me to my heart so that I can like deal with this complexity of life. And the Daimyo might be like, hey, guess what? You're going to work on some really hard stuff tonight. And it is what it is. I just have to say yes.
You're on the ride.
And other times I might be like, hey, I'm deep in the ditches with dealing with my dad or my whatever, and I need to really dive in there and figure some stuff out because it's plaguing me in my life, and I need help. And the Daimyo says, hey, you know what? Like, you're doing all you can, and if I gave you any more, it wouldn't help. Yep. And so have some light instead.
Here's what you are today. I'm just going to give you a nice warm hug.
Enjoy some singing.
Yeah.
And so for new people that might not have that faith and may not have the skills and the capacity to navigate the strong force, they need support. And so for us as a small church, we just have to be really careful that we only have as many people as we can handle safely and responsibly, because we don't want to be leaving anybody, feeling abandoned during the work or, anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of folks, I've talked quite a bit with friends that this interview was going to happen. And the feedback already was just like, I want to hear about it. Like, let me know. I wanted to talk potentially about like some resources for people that do want to explore this stuff more. I know recently my wife and I watched a couple of things that were fascinating. There's Heal is the name of one of the shows. I believe that was on Amazon, and then How to Change Your Mind on Netflix. That was the one. We watched that. I'm like, I'm calling Ben tomorrow. Like, we're getting Ben on the podcast. I really highly encourage people to explore those. Beautifully done, artistic, scientifically based, just great stuff. Very enlightening to watch. Do you have any other ideas, suggestions, books, websites? And if the answer is no, that's fine.
It's again, so, I mean, everything is true, right? Everything is good. Everything is just as it should be. That's my baseline faith. And so if someone is constructed in their personality and their life story in such a way that those shows help them get closer to what they need, then I'm all for it.
Yep.
For me personally, I was in 2016. I was at a conference down in Oakland, and it was the MAPS
very
Psychedelic
cool.
Science concert conference, excuse me. And I did a full day kind of workshop on ayahuasca and kind of in the science of ayahuasca and kind of studies that were being done in other countries where it's legal, like Brazil, where PhDs were doing studies on depression and things like that. And it was interesting. Gabor Mate was one of the presenters. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he works a lot with medicine and also with addiction. And
Dobbin and Leary are kind of the only ones I know of.
Well, you might want to check out Gabor Mate. He's a pretty interesting guy. But at the end of the day, Michael Pollan stood up. He was in the room, and he stood up and said, "Hey, I'm doing research for a new book, and I'm just really happy to be here, and I really appreciate getting a chance to be here." And everybody was like, "Whoa, it's Michael Pollan! How exciting! He's writing a book about this stuff. It's great." And then when I read the book, it was like, it doesn't really get to the heart of the matter for me.
Yeah.
And very often when I watch those shows, they don't really get to the heart of the matter for me. The heart of the matter for me is not really about science.
Yeah.
It's not really about
breaking it down.
Breaking it down and kind of the biochemistry or the I don't know, the Western way of thinking about it, which I hate even saying Western because South America is as West as we are, but
this is a much more Eastern,
more like the white way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Is it doesn't really get to the point. And so
I look at those as more of just a conduit to people that are curious about it.
yeah, I mean, if you're curious and you want to get some information that might help you feel more safe or more open to the idea that these aren't quite as radical as you thought they were, or not quite as dangerous as you thought they were, great. You know, if that helps, like great. You know, I also am in the sort of minority within the community of entheogen and consciousness work, in that I don't really think that we should be putting it in the drinking water. I don't really think that everyone should just go out and take it as quick as they can.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think that, like, you know, while I am 100% for legalization, I think in practice, people need to take this stuff in a way that is optimized for them to have a positive experience, a healing experience, rather than a traumatic one.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, the way that they end up taking it, the resources that they find end up being traumatic, or just not very impactful at all. And again, my faith is that everything is as it should be, and that's kind of like
when it's time,
what's
you'll
meant to
find
be.
it.
But ultimately, like, so ultimately, like, I think rather than kind of recommending resources, I would recommend like tuning into like, what do you actually want to get out of your life, and like, how do you want to get that? You know,
What is the work you need to do?
yeah, what's the work you want to do? You know, and what does that look like? Everybody's doing the work that they need to do, one way or another. You know, you're doing it by living. But like, if you're not getting as far as you want to get, and you've tried meditation and you've tried yoga and you've tried this, that, and the other thing, and this medicine work, you know, in one form or another, whether you heard about it from a friend or you saw a show or whatever, if it hits you in your intuition and you say, this feels like something I need to do, right? Like there's just a message here that says this is something I need to do, then you pursue it.
Yeah.
You know, and just really being clear about the reason that you're doing it, rather than like, oh, well, it's a cool thing to do, everyone's doing it, yada, yada,
Super
yada.
trendy, yeah.
Yeah, it's very trendy, you know, it is. And that's fine, but it's just like, what is the point of it all? You know?
Yeah.
What's the point? And if you don't have to have an answer to that, but you should at least be thinking about it, is my recommendation, my invitation, I guess, would be.
I do think it's very important. That kind of almost comes back to the setting, if you will, of like, you know, look, you know, I've done MDMA at a dance club, and it's kind of crazy and fun, but it's like, it's not enlightening, or it's just like, I'm just having a really good time. Now sitting down with my wife in the hot tub and staring at the stars and having deep conversations, like, holy shit. I don't want to encourage, advocate or any of that stuff. Yeah, actually I do. I really do, folks.
It's
like,
beautiful.
Do it. You know, it's dangerous to get your hands on the street, because I'm trying to remember the drug that they're cutting it with so often these days that's so friggin' lethal. Fentanyl. That's the one. Yeah. But hey, guess what? You know, Magic Amazon has these great little test kits you order, and the last stuff I got was beautiful, clean, perfect, and the experience was delightful. So, yeah. With that, do you have anything else you want to talk about, or?
I mean, if you think your listeners would be interested, we could talk about the men's group that I've been cooking up.
Yes, actually, I wasn't sure if you wanted to explore that. Let's talk about that. They've met Tony, and we've talked about men's work. So they have a concept, I think, the people that have been listening, about men's work in general. This is a slightly different version.
Take.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, given everything that we've already talked about in the episode, you might guess where it's going. But yeah, you know, Chris, you and I met. I was probably 2011, maybe.
10,
maybe
12, something like that.
12, 13, somewhere in there, in a men's group, right?
Yep.
And the men's group we met in was run by Tony. He's a beautiful man. What an awesome guy. He taught me so much. Ooh. And a lot of what he learned was from the Mankind Project, which is this kind of global organization that runs men's work. I did the New Warrior training weekend.
I still need to do it.
Which was an interesting experience for sure. I won't say too much about that, but I will say that men's work landed in my system in a very powerful, healing way. To be seen and be safe in a group of men where you can be vulnerable and just like let it all hang out is like something that we desperately need in our culture, in our world. And I started doing that just few years after I met the Daimi. And I think when you came into the group, I'd already been in the group for a while, I believe. And so I was in that group for, I think, running on maybe 7 or 8 years total. And part of that time I was leading the group. I learned a tremendous amount from Tony. And at the same time, I was also learning a lot from the Daimi. And somewhere in there, it hit me, the intuitive hit or whatever, a message landed in me that was like, we need to combine these two things. Right, the Daimi and men's work, like in me, it's like alchemical, right? They're like mixing in me and creating healing, and they both, either one of them would have on its own, but the way they came together was magnificent. And so for many years, I had that knowing that was something that needed to happen, but I didn't feel qualified to lead yet. Yeah. I didn't have my own church yet. I was still just really a student, still learning. And so it just kind of marinated in my system for a long time, many years. And I would get hits sometimes and I would write notes, and I had this like ongoing folder full of documents about just different ideas I had. And then somewhere in maybe June of 2021, not very long ago, about a little over a year ago, I was working with a guy who was teaching me guitar, actually. And I told him about my ideas, and it just was like a match.
We must do this.
Lighting the inferno, yeah. And so his energy, I bounced off him. His energy just picked it up immediately, reflected it back to me, and it was like, this has to happen now. I'm ready. And it happened. And so what I put together was like a program that takes 6 months, and it's a group roughly around 8 people.
Yep.
And the program is that once a month we're going to do a medicine experience, and then a couple days later we'll do an integration meeting where we talk about the experience, we talk about the impact it had on us, and how we're going to move forward in our life in a new way. Like what if any ways are we going to change the way we live because of the experience we had? And that's really helpful when you have a medicine experience, to have a meeting afterwards where you talk about that stuff, because otherwise it can kind of take on the nature of like an amusement park ride,
yeah.
You know, where you
just went to this thing.
You had a great experience. It was really magical, but then you come back to real life and it doesn't really matter anymore.
Back to the same bullshit.
Yeah. And so it's nice to have that bridge where you can really like try to understand like what's the reality here of like what this means. We say, it's another thing I say in the medicine world is like, I'm on a path of transformation, not a path of transcendence, right? And so people can experience medicine work as very transcendental. But the truth is we want to stay grounded. We want to stay in our present life and have the healing manifest here, because this is where we live, you know, and we're not just waiting to die so we can go off to heaven or something. We're like alive now. And this is where we want to do our healing so that we don't pass on our trauma and our wounds and our injury to the next generation and to our fellows. And so, so how do we change it from transcendence to transformation? We got to talk about it, you know, and we got to figure out how we're going to actually change and be different.
Yep.
And so, so we have a meeting a couple of days after the medicine work, and then a couple of weeks after that, we have just a process meeting where we talk for a couple of hours, do work rounds, dive into just being a man and like what's involved and how we can maybe do it better and what the challenges are.
So you said you do, you've got the 6 to 8 people,
Mm-hmm.
you do a 6-month cycle. Each month you do one medicine.
Yeah.
What are the medicines you currently?
Yeah. So the arc of it is kind of came to me through intuitive channels, and I've worked with it, and it's really a beautiful arc. The first month we do a sweat lodge in the Lakota tradition. I have a friend who holds a beautiful lodge on his land. And so that's the first month. And then the second month, we dive into a day of study with Wim Hof, which is
the breathing, psychotropic breathing.
And cold exposure.
Yep.
And some meditation. And, you know, I go a little deep into the nooks and crannies. So it's like more than just what Wim Hof talks about. I kind of take it a little further. And I don't love to characterize it as Wim Hof because I'm not in his line.
Yeah,
you know?
That's kind of his brand.
It's his brand, and I don't want to co-opt that. I'm not, I'm not paying any royalties. But a lot of what he says is really beautiful, and his practice that he's developed is really beautiful. And so we use that as a jumping off point. And I've got a chest freezer in my garage that I've sealed with caulk and filled with water, and so it's nice and cold, so we can do the cold exposure.
Boy.
And it's a beautiful day. It's an amazing day. And then from there, we jump into more people think about when they say medicine works, right? So the next month is Kambo, the frog medicine. We purge and cleanse ourselves, get ready for the consciousness work. The next month after that is working with mushrooms and also with music. So the way we do it is it's a very kind of musical day with the mushrooms. And then the next month is MDMA work as a group, and then the final one is a daimyo work.
So you've really this was very intentional, kind of like you said, the arc, the way you're moving people through a spectrum.
That's right. Yeah, and for me, the way I conceptualize it is really about building skills. Being in the medicine space requires skills, and the more skills you have, the more you're going to get out of it. And so, it's like anything you do in life. When you start something new, when you first start, you don't have any skills. And we, especially in our culture, we're so conformist and we're so hard on ourselves. We're so shame-based that like we just assume that we're supposed to have all the skills we need
brilliant
to
right off the
be
bat.
excellent at everything we do without, any effort. And you show up in the medicine space and you've never done it before, you're going to kind of get your butt kicked one way or another. You're not going to be able to like navigate it in the same way that the people who have years of experience can. But we can like build up our muscles a little bit. And so coming into the sweat, you kind of get some of the challenge, but your consciousness is still pretty grounded. And so you can work with just like, I want to quit, I want to leave this lodge, and the door is right there and there's no shame. I mean, it's very clearly stated again and again. If it's too hot and you need to leave, just leave. Right. So part of what we're working with is just like, are you going to let yourself leave when you have to? Or are you going to force yourself to man up in some bullshit macho thing, right? That ends up leaving you just like wiped out and like you didn't really get anything out of it anyway. So, when a man leaves the lodge in the middle of a round, everybody rallies around that guy. It's not like everybody's like, oh, that guy's a weakling. Yeah. We're all saying, man, like, thank you for being authentic to your experience and like, hope you're okay. And like, let's be together, Yeah. So that's building skills and muscles. Right?
So you're basically, you start people with the first 2 sessions of, or medicines or whatever you want to call it, becoming accustomed to being uncomfortable. Yeah. Like you're still very grounded, you're present, you know what's up.
You're facing challenges.
And then you slowly start to introduce like, we're going to get you a little out of your comfort zone.
That's right.
Physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like,
yep. And at the same time, of course, we're doing it together. So we're building trust. We're going through the wars together. You have this group, yeah. So the group is building trust, and none of the guys know each other before we start. So how do you get to know each other better than being in
those
sweat lodge together, being in the cold water together, being like by the time we hit the Kambo and off into the outer realms, people are like so comfortable with each other.
They're family at that point.
Yeah, we're brothers.
Ah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's a magnificent group. I did one round in 2021. It kind of moved into the spring of 2022. And then I just started another one in July.
Yeah, I was supposed to be part of it, and I am sad, and I appreciate you. I had to make that phone call because I sat down with Sarah, and she was like, look, the podcast is starting to take off. You've got a lot of money and a lot of time invested in this. She's like, you can't do these, the family, your job. Like, I was like...
Yeah, you don't want to be strung out. You don't want to stretch too thin. It doesn't end up benefiting you.
Yeah, exactly. You lose the message of what you were trying to do anyways. But like I said, whether we do a private session with Sarah and I, or whether I join the next round of the men's group, I'm very, very interested in, and we'll definitely be exploring this with you. So.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
Well, Ben, dude, thank you for being here. This has been fucking spectacular. I think people are going to find this to be quite something to think over. So...
I hope so. I mean, my goal always with this kind of thing is just to be helpful, and hopefully anything I've said might, at least one thing might be helpful to you. That's my wish. I really do bless everybody's journey, whatever it looks like. And there's really, like, for me, I kind of like, I've learned how just harmful it is to like hang on to or attach to judgments about how anybody does anything. And so it's like, if you take MDMA and go dance at a rave, like, and you get something out of it, like, I think that's beautiful, right? Yeah. And like, if you go work with a shaman who calls himself a shaman because they want to, and you drink ayahuasca with them and you get some healing, it's like, great, that's awesome. And if those things don't feel like the right fit and you're looking for something cleaner or by your own definition, cleaner or safer or whatever, just keep looking. And, don't settle for, what you've been able to find so far if it's not the right thing.
Yep.
Just like anything else, you just have to you have to be in integrity with yourself, and like just make sure that you're listening to your intuition and like what do you actually need, and then go find it.
Like I started,
and it's out there.
If you're not changing it, you're choosing it.
That's right.
Much love, brother.
Be well to everyone, and thanks for listening.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Much love, folks.
Take care. Thanks, Chris.
Talk to you soon.